Guten Abend, mein Name ist Ashley Swartz. Ich bin hier in Köln mit BTV für die letzte Tag von DMEXCO, the Super Advertising Conference in Deutschland. Hi, I'm Ashley Swartz. I'm here for the last day and the second day of DMEXCO in Cologne, Germany with BTV. It was an amazing show. I gotta say, all advertising, all ad tech, all the time. It was great. That's actually what is so sort of resonates so well about DMEXCO is that it's absolutely a quality show. Everybody's here is intimately in the advertising industry. It is filled with advertising technologies, new platforms, new providers, both local that are sort of focused on pan-Europe, as well as large global and international players. It's a really interesting sort of meeting of both sides. I mean, look, as always, I'm going to start with what I say every time I come here. Europe's not a country, right? You come here from the US. This year, I think we had over 1,000 participants from the US. About 25% of the attendees were international. And you sort of see that, right? You get here, you understand it's a different marketplace. The business challenges and the operational overhead of doing business in Europe are quite different. The localization, the need to sort of understand the laws of privacy and data constraints within each market, all of that sort of make for a much more complex ecosystem and marketplace. The coming here as Americans in particular within our industry, we learn that. It's not necessarily one giant homogenized approachable market of 250 million people. Not to say the US is that. The conversations this year, although I have to say have been more global. Not only have I heard more English on the trade show floor, I've actually heard much more of the conversations being about sort of global business endeavors, global platforms, things like that, right? A lot of US companies here launching global initiatives. And overarching, the thematic has been about programmatic, RTB, and a very sort of German way of looking at it, but automation, right? And if you dive into that, that's really about reducing your overhead costs, more efficiency on your marketing investments. It's also about an entirely different sort of talent pool and talent mapping of your teams, whether at agencies or at companies. And the sort of conclusion that I've drawn is that the lexicon of our industry is so much less marketing as it is technology. Every one of the brother with whom I spoke, except for a few sort of from the creative side of the business, dropped so many three-letter acronyms, I felt like I was having a geek moment and at home with every individual with whom I spoke, right? I mean, that's great. But it lends itself to where we are at a point in time in our industry, and I think it's an interesting paradox being here in Europe is that translation is a big problem, right? It's not just translation from country to country, market to market, localization. It's also translation from sort of, Tech Valley in the software industry and Madison Avenue. And now, Champs-Élysées, right? More and more challenging. The complexities are becoming more and more multidimensional, and it's much more challenging for brands and marketers to solve for what is an ever increasingly sort of multivariate equation. What I also notice is that we're talking a lot about addressability, data targeting, et cetera, and put aside the fact that that's a much more challenging space in Europe because we have privacy laws, we have constraints on retargeting and cookies, et cetera, particularly in markets like Germany that are a bit more regulated and conservative and require opt-in, not opting out. That being said, not a lot of conversation about creativity, right? And how creative optimization is essential, that if we know to whom we're speaking, we probably sort of have to optimize the creative against them to really get the ROI from the investment we're making in data and technology to sort of figure out who our audience is in a more meaningful way. I think we have a long way to go, and the reason maybe we don't talk about that a lot is because that's a lot more art than it is science. And it's very apparent most folks here are really comfortable talking about science and sort of technology and software, and maybe a little bit less about storytelling. However, the brand and the up-funnel requirements of brands and marketers, and that video is sort of omnipresent, it is absolutely resoundingly notable that it is about brand marketing still, right? So we sort of have this chasm, and that's actually what I'm walking away with. It's not that it's one or the other, it's binary, but that we do have a bit of divergence in the industry right now. You've got sort of agendas that are myopically focused on up-funnel, brand, storytelling, et cetera, social, things like that. Things that are still sort of enigmatic and that we don't know how to measure their ROI. And then you've got the myopic focus that is really performance-driven and down-funnel about where's the ROI on investment, how do we automate, reduce overhead, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that sort of chasm, next year I'm hopeful comes together a little bit. And I just spoke to Christian, one of the co-founders of the show. He was talking about sort of the future being about, experience and making it more tactile and really showing off technology and the capabilities. And I think that as more and more of our industry actually gets their hands around and experiences the technology and the sort of human man-machine interfaces that are making their advertising more relevant and meaningful to audience, mostly because audience behaviors are changing faster than we as brands and marketers can keep up, that's going to go a long way in helping us actually create experiences that are memorable and create those connections that drive meaningful value, i.e. move our P&L through sales and better profitability.